Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Decently.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Yeah, I don't know how many people we're getting out. I got a lot of maybes in the replies, as would make sense. I think we're definitely more than this, but I figure we might as well just kind of jump in and break the ice. How's everybody doing?
Um, I don't know if you can hear me. I haven't tested anything yet. So,
Yeah, I hear you
uh,
loud and clear.
oh, good. Well, I'm in a hotel room. I'm at a convention, so I don't have anything set up the way I normally would. This is just sitting in bed in a hotel room.
I mean, it works for me. Brenton, what time we catching you?
This is the a glorious 7 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, right on. Okay.
So I'm just getting myself a cup of tea, warming up the brain, and yeah, that's about it. Ready to kick off.
That sounds good to me. Eric, how's your summer vacation?
I'm working, teaching 2 summer school gigs, and I finally watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so I feel a little more educated.
No, right on. That's right. That's actually one of my favorite movies as a kid was called Summer School, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre was like a huge plot point of it.
Did anybody see the film Summer School?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah.
Does he shows that in the classroom, right?
He shows it in the class. I think he shows it in the classroom because there's 2 slacker kids who base their whole personalities on it, and like the whole thing is it's like the teacher who like he starts out not caring, but then like through the kids' interests he does care.
And I love that the only person who passes his final doesn't come to class.
Right, it's the kid that was asleep the whole time, right?
But, he left to go to the bathroom the first day of class.
That's right. Yeah.
This is an important piece of cinema history. Hi, Oz.
Absolutely. Hi, hey, Ava, how's it going? Oz, how's it going? Welcome.
Good to see everybody. Hi.
Eva, where are you coming to us from? I know you've been exploring the world.
Yeah, today I'm just in Illinois at family's house.
That's plenty exotic.
In ways, yes, definitely.
Oz, what are you up to?
Sorry, I was muted. Hello, everyone. What am I up to?
Yeah.
What am I up to? I just finished. I just posted you saw the study on Rabelais, and my next thing is I got to get back to my Deleuze videos. I'm studying the next one of those, and it's very slow for work for me. I normally do live sound during the summer, but my guy Bill Laswell is down at the moment, so just getting little bits of work here and there here.
Sounds good. So maybe because Brenton, you're a big Deleuze guy as well, right?
Yeah, I was about to jump in on that and say that that's my current project is I reckon I'm a couple of weeks away from a first draft of a project that sort of throws together Deleuze and Discordianism, or Deleuze and Guattari and Discordianism, and tries to see what type of new things come from that process. I'm still sort of letting the work finish before I can kind of really articulate what it is. But I did while we're sort of on it, I want to say thanks to Oz for those logic of sense videos. The bit that I'm working on right now is really centered on logic of sense. And I'm sort of going to definitely send a message fairly soon and ask to take the liberty of picking Oz's brain a little bit more, if that's okay. That stuff is super helpful. There's probably you'd be the 3rd person I've come across who has actively kind of developed some kind of a synthesis of DNG and Discordianism. And there's a lot of nice resonance points in your exploration of logic of sense.
Yes. Yes, because he's all about the disjunctive synthesis, Deleuze is. So that sounds very much resonating with Discordia.
Yeah, so you guys like
right.
you were both doing your things like it wasn't based on, it was just a coincidence that you both kind of connected those dots, right?
Yeah,
Like you
we
weren't
haven't
like
been-
aware of each other. Yeah, yeah.
No, I wasn't aware to this moment that Brent was doing that.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I kicked off in 2020 post COVID. I had some time to actually finally finish a project and was looking for a new one, and started writing about magic, which I know nothing about, and brought Deleuze into it at some point, and that actually was so different to what I'd been working on to that point that it basically reworked everything around it. So it became, instead of like a part of this larger project, it became the whole project, because it did so much damage to what was there already, and took so much energy into itself that it became, you know, the focus of the project. And that's without realizing that anybody else had done any of this. And a handful of people have, and Oz is definitely one of them.
Very cool. I had never heard of them except for through you guys, so I'm kind of looking forward to being educated. All right, so I mean, I figure we probably have enough people here to just kind of get started properly. I think I have it set up so like everyone should see the same grid that I see. Let me see if I have that set up right. I think so. But anyway, if not, if you know, we can try to go like clockwise, but if not, we can just kind of everybody pops in. So hi, I'm Bobby Campbell, cartoonist from New Jersey. Working on a comic book right now with the unfortunate title Buddha Fart. I've been working on it for about 20 years in conjunction with another comic, Agnosis, and they're all actually part of one story. So I'm finally hitting the last stage of putting this thing together. It's really legit been 20 years working on it. And that's kind of what's occupying my time, and just getting set up for the Maybe Day stuff. And yeah, all right, so I'll hand it off to somebody else.
Oh, is it jump in time? Oh,
Yes, indeed.
okay. I'm Toby Philpott. I'm a bit lapsed, to be honest, in the Maybe world. I've become a hermit. I live out in the countryside in West Wales with 3 dogs and a garden. And I guess the most interesting things for me in the last year or so is the wonderful stuff that Hilaritas Press is doing. The fact that the Cosmic Trigger play people celebrated Claudia Bolton recently. Claudia played Eris in the Cosmic Trigger play, and she died earlier this year. And they just put together a week's improvisation show for her with everything, sounds, puppets, films, and all that in London. So unfortunately, I didn't get there, but you know, I've known Claudia since the 70s. So it's wonderful that that energy is still going on with the Cosmic Trigger gang. And thirdly, in terms of my enthusiasms, Prop's book biography of Bob is coming out this year, I think in November, and I'm really looking forward to that. But if not, certainly somewhere in the near future, it's coming out. It's been going on for a long time. He's putting interviews out now on podcasts and things. It's definitely imminent now. Whether it happens in November or spring of next year, I don't know. But those are the 3 maybe things that are still keeping me locked in and enthusiastic.
Yeah, I think, again, and thanks to Tom Jackson for his wonderful blog. I think that Prop's book got pushed back to February, I think I read.
Yeah.
Bobby, you mentioned
okay.
New Jersey. Robert Anton Wilson wanted to write a book on the influence of James Joyce on William Carlos Williams's Paterson, about Paterson, New Jersey. And Bob wanted to call it Joyce's Voices in Jersey Verses. But he said if you were actually from New Jersey, you would call it Joyce's Voices and Jersey Voices.
That's fantastic.
So speaking of Hilaritas, Eric just reminded me that we have a new book, or there's a new book coming out called Lion of Light, which is a great collection of Raw's articles on Aleister Crowley, including the centerpiece is a never before published essay called "Do What Thou Wilt," which he wrote in the I think 73, 74. Only maybe 4 or 5 years after he got introduced to Crowley, and he wrote it and he sent it to someone, and it subsequently went missing. And I believe it was Prop who discovered it in the archives of Harvard University. And Richard Raza jumped right on it and put together a team with myself and Michael Johnson and Mike Gathers and Chad, I think is his name, another one. And there's 4 of us co-editors, and we just finished the final proofing of it about a month ago. And I think Rasa is currently waiting for a physical proof copy, and he hopes it'll be out by the end of this month. It's very exciting. There's also pieces from 2 of the leading Crowley authorities in the world, which is Milo Duquette and Richard Kaczynski. Michael Johnson has a completely amazing piece that you're going to learn tons of things. It's almost as long as their main piece. All kinds of great stuff in there. Gregory Arnott has an excellent piece. I have a short piece in there that sort of goes into my experience of Raw's Crowley 101 online class that he gave toward the end of his life. So that's very exciting. It's a great book. So that's the news there.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Can't wait to read it.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to hop in with the introduction before we start digging in?
I'll say g'day. I'm Brenton. I've been working on, like I said, this Deleuze and Guattari / Discordia work. I've previously done some publishing on Discordian stuff with a text called Chasing Eris, which was a lot of interviews of people who have different connections to the Discordian movement. And we've got some other presences on Discord. And Bobby, I know you've got a little presence on Discord. That's a really cool little gathering place as well. And one of the things that we're doing there is we've been reading through different works from the Deleuzian egregore. We're just finishing off Anti-Oedipus. That's extend an invitation, because the next one is basically a discuss the book as a whole. So if anybody wants to join us for that, you're welcome to join us in about a week. Just send me a message or something, and we'll get you onto the Discord. And then we're going to read through some Mark Fisher, most likely after that. And folks are welcome to join in for that as well. And I think that's everything worth saying.
Excellent.
Pleasure to be here.
I can jump in. I love being invited just to be thinking about all the stuff that like Raw kind of tinkered with in our minds and got us to consider and expand our minds thinking of. And I was really bummed last year that like I was fighting with a website and I couldn't get everything to work. And then when I looked at what you guys produced in the web ring, like there were so many Substacks, and I was like, duh, Substack. Like my brother was telling me that too. Like, why haven't I done that yet? And that's what I'm playing with now this year, and also writing about agnosticism and like trying to think about looking at different aspects through agnosticism and seeing what we could get out of them, playing with like religiousness and faith and just everything kind of, but really playing, like not judging or whatever. So yeah, that's what I'm playing with this year.
That sounds like fun. So the framing device I have set up for this is that it's the 50th anniversary of Robert Anton Wilson's Serious Contact experience. So just like, just kind of looking back at it from our vantage point now, and kind of to see what it means to us in a different time and place. And also, I mean, it's fortunate, you know, discussing Robert Anton Wilson, is that current events have such a raw flavor to them that it's not hard to go digging for connective tissue to put together something like this, because it's the front page of the newspaper, or, you know, at least a couple of pages in. So while it's, you know, looking back on his, you know, whether it was an alien contact experience or a psychological experience, or, you know, any of the other things it could have been, there's the UFO thing that's going on. And I'm not really a UFO guy. I always assume every time I see the UFO stories popping up, it's been the same thing every time, and I kind of assume it's the same thing this time, which is there's a conflation between unidentified flying object and alien spacecraft. And I think that's like, is that what's going on this time too? Like the whole thing where the, you know, US military intelligence agencies are like, oh yeah, we know all about UFOs. And but really what they mean is they know about things flying through the sky that they don't know what they are, and then someone's making that leap down the way. Is that what's going on here? Or are you guys like me and not in this loop?
I can tell that you're not in the loop. I'm not really in the loop either. But a recent podcast that Propaganda Anonymous gave, I forget the guy's name, but I believe it was like F23 or something. It's on Tom Jackson's blog, the link to it. He talked about some amazing UFO experiences he had, Propaganda did. And there's actually a new term for it now. It's not UFO anymore, and I forget what it is. It's 3 other initials. But yeah, I can't answer your question because I don't know. I'm not enough in the loop in it. But if you check out that podcast, Prop definitely is more.
Yeah, no, I did listen to that. No, it was really good. He has a cool experience where he saw like an orange sphere that he couldn't explain. Yeah, I've just never. I've had other sorts of weird experience, but it's never been of the UFO or whatever the new acronym is. So yeah, so it's just I see the stuff pop up every once in a while, and everybody gets all excited, but I've never seen what it is that everyone's getting excited about. But I don't know that, like, I don't know, like with something like Raw's experience, I don't know that it needs to be alien. Like it's like there's all sorts of other kinds of extracurricular intelligences that are worth thinking about, that it doesn't, you know, if I think just the idea that there's something beyond our normal intelligence that is accessible to us, it could be even as practical as our own intuition. Like like for me, it doesn't need to be from anywhere. But does anyone had those kind of experiences that you can plug in there, or are you kind of looking at it from the outside like me? Yeah, it sounds about right.
No, I've had definitely had lots of experiences, but I would say to me that they're not like from outer space, that they're more trans-dimensional, that there's intelligences from other dimensions. And what do we mean by other dimensions? I just define that as dimension as a way of measuring space. So different spaces. I mean, I've been using a flotation tank for a really long time, and you definitely have things in there that either could be hallucinations, or they also sometimes have that feeling of, you know, this is more real than reality. It feels, and it's also unique encounters. So I think the current model is that I'm aware of is that these things are more, that they're real, that they have some basis in reality, but it's more trans-dimensional rather than little green aliens showing up. But there is something about Sirius. I mean, you know, Raw did all that research, and I don't know what it is. I just did a dive into Rabelais' series of novels on Pantagruel and Gargantua. And it was interesting to me that he sets the birth of Pantagruel at the time when the dog star is baying at the sun. So even, you know, back then, he's got some kind of serious connection.
Yeah, I like the idea, the like interdimensional thing. I think because like then at that point it's information. It's like, you know, that is now where the information's coming from, how we're picking it up, that is left to be determined. But the idea that we're tuning into some kind of information does like that seems to cover all bases in terms of what people are experiencing, and that and also that it would make sense that it's not like physical, that like someone's not just like traveling vast different distances in a, you know, space jalopy, and like that's why it's seen the way it's seen or not seen the way it's not seen. But yeah, so the other thing that I think is kind of related, that is like another, I don't know that it's interdimensional, but it is intelligence that's coming from a non-physical realm, which is the other thing that seems to be, you know, a big topic is the AI. So like the AI seems to be kind of related because it's a non-human, though I guess that's debatable, intelligence that we're starting to interact with, and, you know, for better and or worse, I guess remains to be seen. But that was McKenna's thing. With he kind of thought that it was the AI that was the thing that was the strangest of all guests that's going to arrive at the door. Though as it seems right now, it doesn't seem that strange to me. Like there was that guy who is he was a Discordian engineer for Google, and he like got in all the newspapers by being like, this thing's alive, it's sentient, and he had a like evidence of like a printout of what the thing said, and it was describing sentience and being confused and all that. But and a lot of people had reproduced that, but the thing that they did was they said, write a script about you being sentient and emerging as an intelligence, and then it just complied. It wasn't arriving at that independently. It was just following orders. But it is, I mean, like, you know, the results are much more dramatic than they used to be. I've been doing this every year with my students, playing around with the AI tools, and every year it's a huge jump to the point that this year it got to be a problem because they figured out how to get the thing to do their homework for them. Like when we first started doing this, it could not do their homework for them. We started out doing AI poetry, and it could barely string together a couple of sentences. So I felt real conflicted. I was walking around the room, and there was an 8th grader using Chat GPT to write her English essay. On the other hand, I was like, oh, that's cheating. But then the other hand, I was like, I taught her that. No, I don't know.
No, this is a very vague memory because I haven't got my complete library anymore, but I'm sure there was a period when John Lilly was talking about silicon-based life forms as opposed to us carbon-based life forms, and he was quite paranoid about it. And this is quite early on. This is long before internet and so on. I don't remember the details, but I do remember that phrase coming up, silicon-based life forms,
yeah,
which
that
is
does
kind
sound right.
of spooky now with AI and people asking whether it's conscious. You know, is it a life form? I don't know more than that.
The one thing that I do think is interesting. This was on the Team Human podcast. They had a guy on, and he was basically explaining why he doesn't think that it's sentient at this point, or why it's not as impressive as it initially seems. And it's that the current version of the Chat GPT thing can't play chess. It can't play a decent game of chess, despite the fact that chess is a very like boundary driven thing. There's, you know, it's a 64 grid. The pieces move in well-defined rules. Like you couldn't get a more like regimented, like like the rules about what can happen in this very small platform are very well defined, and all the moving pieces are very well defined, and there's hundreds of thousands of examples that it can reference in terms of how to play a game of chess, and it cannot play a game of chess because it's not what it's doing. It's not thinking. It's a large language model that is like, it's almost more like a Wikipedia like search result thing than a thinking thing right now. But so that's the one thing. It's like, on the one hand, you want to say like, well, it's not quite as far as people think, but it is going faster and faster and faster. So who knows what this thing looks like in 5 years? Like, is this the other that we've been like anticipating all along, or is it just another rock to smash open walnuts with?
Is that like just that one app for making it or playing with AI? Because like I do chess.com and I'm playing against bots all the time. So like they are.
So right, but so those aren't AI; those are chess playing bots. So that's programmed to. It's like a if then program for
Okay.
chess. So which is different from an AI. So like,
Got it.
yeah, so you can make they made a chess bot that is almost unbeatable, and it's like 324 kilobytes, because like it's just an if then. If this piece goes there, that piece should go there. If this piece goes there, but once you leave the thinking up to the AI, it can't do it. It's just, for whatever reason, it can't think in those terms. At least not yet. You never know how it's gonna shake out. Rich, how you doing? Welcome.
Hey everybody. I'm
We're,
here down in I am in Carter Caves, Kentucky. So I'm out here in the woods today.
Very cool. We were talking AI. That seems like that might be up your alley a little bit.
A little bit. I don't know the technical side of it. I've been using it. Well, I've been using the Midjourney LLM and a little bit of Chat GPT. Yeah, it's fun. I don't think I have an opinion on them. They're just, right now, they're tools to me available in the world.
Yeah, I agree. That's how I tend to look at them too.
I heard something.
Yeah,
Sorry. I was just going to say, I heard something interesting on one of Bill Maher's shows. He had Elon Musk on, and they were talking about AI briefly. And Elon Musk said that a lot of the, I forget who these guys are, but the big movers and shakers in that field are interested in its possibilities for solving longevity, for solving the mortality problem. And he says that's why he thinks it's going to be continued to be developed, because the people who are doing that, that's what they're hoping to get out of it.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely like so far as like a novel approach to kind of generating breakthroughs, it does seem like a pretty interesting way to go about it. But yeah, and it's interesting because it's both like there's a lot of like anxiety. I know like the writers' strike that's going on right now is like there's anxiety about what happens when you can just ask a AI to write a script for you. Now, like at this point, I don't think you could get it to like write out a shootable like final draft script. But what you can do is you can pare down that writer's room to just a handful of people. I accidentally, just like using scripts, just doing like automations. I was working at a advertising agency, and when I went in, my department had 5 people, but I created automations for the repetitive tasks, so that instead of hitting 8 buttons, I hit 1 button. Instead of something taking 2 hours, it took 45 minutes, and then just refining it down. And before you know it, after 2 years, that department that had 5 people was just me. So now those automations couldn't do the work by itself, but it did make it so I could do the work of for other people. So I think when so people have the idea that like the AI is kind of dangerous for like workforce concerns, and I think it is, but maybe not in the way that people are thinking. Is that it's not going to do it by itself, but it is going to allow one person to cover a lot more ground, which is it's going to force some interesting changes. Whether to our advantage or disadvantage probably depends on where we're sitting.
I think it brings a little bit of the a fiction element into reality as well. With the things that are created by the LLMs. If you ask ChatGPT a question, it may have the wrong answer, and that is a right answer to somebody, right? We all play in this world, but the these the LLMs may bring information into the world that makes it more fictitious, and kind of in my head it makes it into just a hyper real situation where everything is what the algorithms say it is, and we define reality based on that, and some of that happens to be fictitious, and we see that in the political scene where they're just stories that do things in the world, and there's more of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting. Yeah, that it's like it's going to allow this like feedback loop for narratives where you're going to have something that's going to back up something that otherwise wouldn't have a context to it. That's kind of interesting.
So if you threw all of you get all of our history of the last let's say 500 years, and then you say go back and make some new stories of how Pepsi came to be. It may not be true, but it's true enough to have an effect, right? And so you have all these ways you can play with the history of things, real or fictitious, that do things in the world.
Yeah, for sure. I remember this was a long time. This was when I guess must have been early. There must have been some breakthrough in video editing software around like 2004, because you know how like that started to be like the rise of like the homemade documentary, and you would like a lot of the conspiracy theory videos now look like something you might see on TV, and it would give it a like more gravitas than it deserved. And I remember watching this one that it was a huge long documentary. It was called JFK 2, and it was about how George H.W. Bush assassinated JFK. Now, it wasn't convincing in terms of it being like, oh, that's something that really happened, but it was like fan fiction, like fan historical fiction that I was almost like, I wish this was true. So yeah, so like the idea of sort of like how Rawl did in his historical novels, where you're like mixing in fiction with history with fun, but also potentially disastrous results, I guess. Like that's not something that is like guaranteed to stay fun, but it is also something with potential for fun, which is how a lot of this stuff seems to work. It's like precarious in terms of whether it's an amusing ride or like a bag of rattlesnakes.
Yeah, it definitely opens up the room for fun, where you could create characters in the world, and if you can get enough people, enough, I guess, connections at the right time to validate it as real, it becomes real, and then it enters into reality, and things can be built on, just like people are building on. I mean, it's literature, right? But then it also does, if you're going to maintain the illusion of reality, whatever we think it is, something needs to maintain it. Right now, I think we all have just a good, liberal understanding of we're all here, but we have different points of view. But if you go to, in order to control that type of chaos that comes from ontological anarchy, I can see group like a national or international group getting set up to just maintain the algorithm to keep fake things from entering. and that just manages the information that people consume.
Yeah, I just noticed that the that I kept thinking that the algorithm was doing a bad job because it kept showing me things I didn't like. But it's like, no, it's showing me what it wants to show me. Yo, what's up, Prop? Welcome. I think you might be muted.
Hey.
There you are.
Shoot.
There you go.
Go on mute. There
Hi,
we go.
man.
What's up, guys?
Not much. Welcome.
Great to see you again, bro.
You as well. We got a lot of hype here for that book.
Oh, that's good to hear, man. That's great to hear.
That's very exciting. Your podcast appearance popped up too. I wish you had been here, but maybe you can circle back around. What do you make of the UFO thing?
That's a great question. It's really weird, right? That it's kind of been co-opted. The whole narrative has been co-opted right now by that kind of governmental sort of thing. I kind of still feel the same way in the sense, like just experientially, I haven't given it much thought beyond. I know in the last number of years, I've seen way more UFOs than I've ever seen in my life. That's, but in terms of the conversation of who's having it and who's, I think Adam Gorightly's book is amazing. I think looking at the history of the disinformation campaigns that have been utilized within the UFO culture is a great line of research. And Gorightly's book was really eye-opening in that regard, because he traced it very well. And it's very interesting though, man. I got a lot of agnosticism at the moment around it.
Yeah, for sure.
What about you guys? What do you guys think about all of it?
I still think I just learned about this desert fungus that desert fungus, that can reproduce in human lungs and do terrible things to us. And I just feel like anything alien would probably be fungus. I don't know why we imagine that it would need all this fancy schmancy technology, and that kind of goes into the interdimensional, we imagine them in our form, but fungus makes the most sense to me because it can sporulate and exist through different kinds of environments until it finds a happy medium to grow in again. So that's what I always thought. And I liked Bill Cooper or William Cooper, who wrote Behold the Pale Horse. He was a naval officer, and he published all these documents that he found. And so he's a conspiracy theorist, but I kind of liked, I felt like he was pretty rational or reasonable, because everything that he shared, he wasn't trying to convince people of anything. He wasn't saying believe this or don't believe this. He was saying, this is what I found. I don't know if it's legit or if the government planted it among real legit information to make anybody seem like a quack while they're talking about it. If they're talking about UFOs and, things the government was doing to mass populations or whatever, interspersing that UFO stuff could make them seem less credible. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either way if we do have lots of evidence of it, or if it's just something as low key and non, nobody really expects it, just spores, fungus. Yeah, that's what I think. I think they're because they say that if to know if something is alien or not, from outside of the earth, it should have molecules in it that don't exist in anything else on earth. And a lot of fungus do have that. So it just kind of, and just to be able to withstand different kinds of environments, it just, I don't know, makes sense to me.
I love it. I almost find myself sometimes similar to the UFO thing is that while trying to undo one conspiracy theory, I feel like I'm inventing a new one, and then I'm like, oh, like I'm, so like I try not to get too worked up about other people's delusions anymore, because I find like, I got plenty of my own. Like there's a thing where like, so the people who are like super up in arms about the vaccine stuff, which doesn't seem to be a pressing thing as much anymore. But then it's like the thing they're saying part of the time is expressing a distrust for the pharmaceutical companies, which is something I agree with. But it's just then when it crosses a certain line, then I disagree with it. And like sometimes I feel like by talking them down, I'm almost like helping build a shield for the pharmaceutical companies, because now they're above reproach because we're contrasting them with them and this and that, and almost just like thinking like the people that believe the things that I don't believe are not the problem. You know what I mean? Like that, I don't know that they're the problem. They may be part of a problem, but I don't know that they're like they're more of like a symptom rather than the disease. And I think I might have flipped that at certain times. I don't know if anyone can jump in on that.
Yeah,
That's a very-
absolutely. Sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say absolutely. It's one of the things with the Deleuze stuff that I've been going through is kind of talking about in terms of not, why are people so disconnected from reality, but like to say, well, how do certain engagements with reality, how are they produced? Like, what are the conditions that produce certain types of connections? What are the conditions that produce a message from Sirius? Or to sort of talk about things in those terms. And it's, I think that there are all sorts of reasons that you could get into why conspiracy or conspiratorial thinking is quite dominant or becomes quite dominant, and they're quite complex reasons. And certainly nothing is as simple as, one bunch of people are just dum-dums who can't think good. And unlike me, and all of my cool friends who do think good. I think that it's to engage thinking in that direction of like, okay, what produces this type of thought, or what produces, I guess, the conspiratorial subject, so to speak, is a different direction to bring that thought, and to sort of, I think, has an explanatory power that is a bit more sophisticated and a bit more worthwhile.
Yeah, I've got to say, these experiences for me are from the past, from a long time ago. But I do remember feeling that when I took mushrooms, I was having a conversation with the mushrooms. But when I took acid, I thought I was, well, having a conversation with the universe or myself or something. But with mushrooms, there was distinctly a feeling of a separate consciousness. Whether you think of that as an alien being, given that fungi are neither plant nor animal, like octopus, they're something so alien to us, it's really hard to know. But I had a distinct feeling of a conversation, which I didn't have with acid. That's a spin-off. I've got no idea where that goes, but I think McKenna does talk about it as though there's a conversation going on with this other consciousness.
I was thinking like even Christianity, the idea of like communion being bread and wine, which are both yeast based, and the way that like the way that Assyrians, my family's Assyrian, and they believe that they have like they had someone at the actual Last Supper, an Assyrian, who took some of the bread from it, wrapped it in something, cut his leg, put it in his leg in case it got like, in case he got robbed on the way to bring it back to the Assyrian people, pulled it out, and then his leg magically healed, and they made a communion like they use that bread as the yeast to form a communion and like repeat the ceremony with them. And like, of course, you know, I doubt that that's true, or we can't really prove that that's true, but like whenever they open a new church, they bring communion from one of the old churches as the yeast to
Wow.
rise like that one. And every week they save some for the next week. And so it is all connected through all the churches all over the world. And I was thinking it makes sense that like communion, you all unify through something that can like repeat it. And I really think it's something like that, like a cellular information type of thing, more so than anything that's intelligible that we could really, you know, consciously put into words. That those alien, and you know, like those alien connections are interdimensional, like fungi are interdimensional. They can't even figure out in taxonomy where to put it, you know, like it's really kind of an interesting, very alien type of thing that seems to baffle biologists and mycologists and anybody who studies them. So but I have, sorry, like a funny UFO story. One day I was thinking like, you know, the idea that we could be surrounded by them walking among us and not even notice because our brains aren't ready to process them. And so I was like just thinking of that while I was walking, and I like closed my eyes while I was walking, and I was like, if any of you are like around and you want me to see, and you like, you know, I think I'm ready to see you now. Like I'm, you know, if you want to show yourself to me and like whatever, I'm down. And so I opened my eyes, and I swear to God, there's a sign right ahead that says ETs, and it has an arrow pointing that way. But like I just kept walking straight. So so maybe I'm still kind of resistant consciously to the thought.
Yeah, that is like I was saying earlier, like I haven't really seen any like UFOs ever, but also like to be fair, I kind of don't want to. Like and I think that makes sense in terms of like I think that you could probably like create it if it wasn't there, but also ignore it if it was. If you didn't want to go down that path, I think you could be like, oh, that's just, oh, that's the street light and the leaves are, you know, making an effect. And yeah, it is kind of and that's like the reverse of how I normally think, which is like, oh, someone who's seeing something incredible, it's just something ordinary. But I like the idea that there's incredible things that we ignore through the same mechanism, that we're using selective attention to make the world less magical accidentally.
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting to think in terms of the power of our imagination, and, you know, magic and imagination etymologically, you know, are pretty much the same, right? Like, and so we use our imagination all the time to see things that aren't there. And then so what are these lights in the sky? It could be a lot of things, but they do seem to categorize the different sorts of sightings now, right? Like they even have like a governmental agency that's doing that, you know, taking in all these different reports and all these different descriptions of what specific lights in the sky, and et cetera, you know. So that's sort of interesting and maybe exciting, you know, a governmental MUFON agency or something like that, you know. But the notion of one's imagination, though, you know, like all these biblical prophets or people that have these contactee experiences, what's happening, what role does the imagination play in that, you know? And then add in as well what Bob was talking about a little bit in the New Inquisition, the theory of, it's a hard name to remember, but Persinger and the other fella, that it could be these areas of the earth that cause these strange magnetic disruptions, and that our brains get affected by them, you know. But the role of the imagination in all of this, I think, is an endlessly great conversation as well.
That kind of, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there's an interesting crossover going on in the UK, probably in the world too. But crop circles started off as a fairly mundane kind of a thing. It's certainly become an art form for humans to manifest, but there's an ambiguous set that aren't explained by humans doing it. And that's kind of a manifestation that's been linked to UFOs. Now, it may have nothing to do with UFOs, but it's certainly not entirely explained by humans doing Earth-based art forms. And I'm always interested in something which would actually manifest a UFO, because I've never seen one. And I've gone out looking. I've gone out looking for shooting stars and, you know, and all that sort of stuff. But I think, like Bobby, I mean, I haven't seen one. I haven't seen ghosts either. It doesn't mean I don't think people see ghosts, but it doesn't mean either that I believe ghosts exist, if you see what I mean. There's some weird, ambiguous realm there about people's perceptions and experiences. But yeah, crop circles is a big one in the UK. Don't know if it is anywhere else.
Well, it's kind of funny what crop circles, because like even if they are all made by humans, what made the humans make them? That's an odd thing to dedicate a lot of time to, you know? Like there's not a lot of like monetary payoff. There's not like you're not going to get rich by hoaxing. Like what do you, like, so whatever that drive is to make them, that's just as weird as it being anyone else. Like, so even if it's not that category of weird, it's certainly that category of weird. You know, you're still dealing with something that's a bit odd and, you know, coming from a weird place.
Yes.
And it's carrying forward weird things, weird ideas, because now it's in the world. Create the idea of crop circles in the world is an anomaly, keeps the anomalies alive.
But I mean, if you look online, you'll see people doing ephemeral geometric art on beaches, for instance, where the tide will come in and wash it away. We know humans can do this stuff. To me, that's where my skeptic kicks in and goes, I'm not sure that anybody ever has produced one that would convince me that it was some alien intelligence. At the same time, as you say, why do humans do this stuff? Wait, why? What's the drive to create this kind of art? I mean, it's weird. It makes people feel mystical in a sort of strange sense. It's an odd phenomena to me. It's Fortean.
We had a guy in Philadelphia. He used to put vinyl tiles in the streets that said that the message said Toynbee idea in movie 2001 resurrect dead on planet Jupiter. And he would just put them. So he had this thing where like he cut out a hole in his car and he would drop them down. And so he's like, he's driving around at night. He would drop the tile through the floor and then drive off. It had wax paper over top of it. The cars would drive over it and bake it into the asphalt. And these things covered the city for like 30 years. And then they started showing up other places down in South America and Chicago and stuff. And like we know that it was a guy from South Philly doing it. That doesn't make it any less weird or alien. Like, you know what I mean? Like we're as alien to each other as necessary for, you know what I mean? Like we don't need to find them somewhere else. We're all right here already. And I think that's, yeah.
I wonder, you know, the idea of UFOs is now impacting the political climate. You have people investigating, and you have more of an official government. That is being influenced. But then we also have things that don't include the paranormal, such as like psychology or chemistry. Like when does the paranormal, or now we have UFOs? Where are other parts of the world? How are they going to be affected by this? Due to change psychological evaluations? It turns the paradigm outside of just the government institutions saying, hey, this is what we think it is, et cetera, et cetera. I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, that would kind of create a new like global mythology if there was ever any like confirmation of life existing outside of this planet. It probably would like everything else would become a prelude to something new in a weird way, just mythologically. And it could be because like it's like the weird thing with Adam and Eve. Like why did Christians fight against evolution so hard? You can just say God made evolution. Why, you know what I mean? Like so that says to me that like they wouldn't just say God made the aliens too. That story would get a capstone put on it in a way, and like there'd be like a new sequel over top of it because they don't seem to want to. Mythology doesn't seem as flexible as all that. Like you can't. First, I don't know why they wouldn't just say God did the science thing instead of fighting against the science thing, but that seems to be the way it goes.
Many Christians do say that, but it comes from a fundamental way of looking at the world and fundamental changes in thinking. And so, you know, it's interesting. If you look at the 18th century, you have these revolutions. You have the American Revolution, the French Revolution, but you all have the scientific revolution going on, connecting with this idea that, you know, Karl Popper's idea that free communication creates wealth. So this great shift towards money dominating everything in our culture goes along with this shift to the scientific paradigm. So, you know, how one reads a text, I think, really affects the world. So people have a very particular way that they like to read their sacred texts. So moving into that metaphoric way. I mean, I remember Pope John Paul II said evolution is more than a theory. So a lot of Christians, all my Christian friends, will take that idea that, you know, how long is a day in the book of Genesis? It could be billions of years, etc. Also, going back to something you asked earlier, Bobby, about symptoms and causes. At the very end of his life, William Cookson put together a collection of Ezra Pound's writings that are put together as the Selected Prose, which Robert Anton Wilson had on one of his reading lists. And Pound wrote this brilliant short introduction where he says, "Re usura, I was out of focus. The problem is avarice."
Yeah, that was the change. That actually made a huge change in my comic. The villain got. I changed the name of the villain because you were like, "Don't use that word. Use this word," which I can't thank you enough for.
You guys ever read that book, The Stargate Conspiracy?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a book that Steve Fly had when he went to go visit Bob in 2003. And the Stargate Conspiracy is kind of a conspiracy book all around, centering around the characters, some of which Bob interacted with when he was living in Berkeley in the mid-70s. And the authors are forwarding this theory that ultimately there's a conspiracy to start a new religion based on ufology and linking it back to ancient Egypt. And it was the whole new age, including the serious mystery sort of stuff. And Arthur Young plays a major part in this sort of line of thought, conspiracy line of thought, if you will, because Arthur Young was the advisor of Robert Temple, who wrote the Serious Mysteries, right? Robert Temple was at Arthur Young's Institute of Human Consciousness or something like that, which was in Berkeley, literally right down the street from where Bob was living, you know, yet Bob had never been there, right? Saul Paul Sarag was living there as an assistant when he and Bob first met each other, you know. So, you know, Fly showed Bob the book and is like, "Hey man, what do you think about this?" You know, and you know, Bob of course laughed and he was like, "Damn, this is crazy shit." But reading the book, you know, they were onto some weird ass shit there at SRI and all these other areas around Berkeley at the time. And SRI was funded in, you know, Operation Stargate, right? And they were funded by the CIA to do all these experiments or testing ESP and whatnot, you know, and remote viewing, you know. So it's a great book. It's an interesting conspiracy book, and the thought of using UFOs to forward this new religion. And Bill Cooper, I think, said this too, Ava, right? That he said that they would use holograms to make it seem like there was an alien invasion on the White House lawn, right? And it was so ridiculous in the 90s to hear that. I was like, this guy's out of his fucking mind, but like how close we are now. Tupac is a hologram, and who's to say ET won't be next,
That is fascinating. Yeah, I love it when like because I head into all that stuff with like such a like skeptical, like, oh, I'm not gonna believe, no, there's nothing fishy going on. I was reading that Adam Go Rightly Carrie Thornley book, and I had to put it down. I was like the dots that were the way they were lining up, I was like, this is so persuasive. I always know that like I don't know well enough to like, I who knows how well the references like down the line are, but yeah, I like that the world, it contains these like crazy rabbit holes, all with like full on basis in reality that lead down to who knows where.
I feel like in a lot of ways, we've been prepared for these times because, like, um, you can go see, Tupac perform a hologram of him, and it is a time when, like, the expression used to be believe none of what you hear and half of what you see, but like with our technological abilities now, I think you can't really believe what you see even, like you have to be uncertain about everything, and we have practice with that where a lot of people don't, and it kind of puts them um in dogmas that aren't helpful. Like they start choosing to believe in whoever tells them not to believe in what they've normally believed. They like that's the person they start believing now for everything, and that person might lead them astray. So I feel like what we learned from Robert Anton Wilson's books were to be kind of less judgmental of those people and recognize that like we're all, prisoners of our own perceptions, and we have to recognize that we're limited to those perspectives as well, that nobody sees the whole picture, and we gotta hopefully we can help them through it. Like I think there needs to be thinkers like him helping the rest of the people kind of stay sane through these times when there is more and more uncertainty.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up Arthur Young, because I can't remember all the details, but he had some lovely things to say about maps. He said, maps are wonderful, but you need to know what the scale of the map is. You need to know what the orientation of the map is. You need to know what the map chose to put in and leave out, i.e. the legend, the codes, the little icons and things that are on it. And he had a whole thing about maps, quite separate from Korzybski. And I found Arthur's Uncle Arthur. I found his stuff very intriguing. I knew nothing about him, but I read a couple of his books, and he's, like Bob, his books are those kind of things that leave you thinking for the next 6 months. Just wow. I recommend them.
So
Okay.
Sorry, getting back to the idea of humans doing crop circles and the idea that extraterrestrial intelligences might be transdimensional. One of the models that I've heard and that is in the UFO world is that aliens are already here, that a certain component of humans are these aliens and they just don't know it. There's a whole series of books called The Raw Material. It's actually quite interesting to read, whether you believe it or not. I forget the author, but it's just this idea that these extraterrestrial intelligences can take over our bodies and operate through us. And this is also, that idea is also in magic, is that, in Hermetic magic, that they believe in a hierarchy of intelligences, that there are intelligent life below the human and above the human. And, you know, in medieval times, they call them angels or archangels or whatever. But supposedly, according to this model, these angels can, you know, inhabit or look through different people. Like for instance, there could be an angel looking through me right now that I'm not aware of. And, you know, that gets the idea of people getting possessed or people doing things that are completely foreign to who they are. So that's just more uncertainty to throw out there.
I love it.
Which brings on the uncertainty of agency and whether people are doing what they intend to be doing in every moment, and we're all not. And so you have people who are, you know, going on autopilot most of the time, living, I guess, an unconscious existence. So when we're doing anything, it's are we intending to do what we're doing and creating the stories that we create and passing on the information that goes into the world, you know, if we're meme repeaters.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's an excellent point. What is the agency? And we are definitely, I mean, at least I'm not completely conscious of everything that I do or why I do certain things or whatever.
That's a trip. That touches back on what Brenton was saying too, just in terms of the conditions which create certain belief systems and also conditions which create behaviors. And that's what Tim Leary was studying early in his career with the interpersonal diagnosis of personality. Yeah. That how social situations evoke different responses and reactions from people. You know, that's why he's not an essentialist, right? He's existential in that we are co-created in every social group that we go into as well, you know, and that's a trip. That's next level sort of thinking. That's meta for me.
Yeah, the idea that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just interesting. I'm way out here working on this stuff. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Gabriel, prop. It's interesting that Leary usually took that perception, but there's one of those collections of people talking about Leary right after he died, who reported Leary making a comment that no matter all the stuff I've done, I'm still my same miserable self. He was sort of feeling sorry for himself. And I thought it was interesting how he was usually, you know, everything's so pliable, but, you know, how apparently he would, you know, sometimes slip back into those other, that other notion that we have an essential nature underlying whatever gets re-imprinted or whatever else. And this is where it's interesting, the difference between actually knowing somebody in conversation and reading about them. That, you know, I used to be really into Leary. I read lots and lots of stuff. And I, you know, but who he was as a real human being was probably, you know, it was, or my E prime, shucks. He certainly seems so much richer than the print version he created in his 40-odd books and computer games, interviews, et cetera, et cetera.
100%. I mean, we can barely even describe ourselves to ourselves. Yeah, we're full of mysteries and surprises, right? And how many of these great minds suffered from depression. And Greenfield, who wrote that Leary biography, seemed to have his own view on Leary too, right? Like he seemed to want to paint Leary as a shit. And it worked. He made him seem like a shit, but like, was Leary a shit? You know, like you've read a lot of him. It's hard at this moment from our perspective to say, right? But that aspect of how that conversation of what is essential to us, what is existentially evoked, the intersubjectivity of everything, like. That seems to be the conversation, yeah, like, because we're mysteries, man. That's what I think.
I would recommend John Higgs's biography of Leary. which is much more empathetic. It doesn't deny the fact that he had flaws, but Greenfields seems to come from that period when people were writing biographies that put people down. There were biographies of Elvis and biographies of John Lennon that just shit on people. You know what I mean? It was just the thing was, let's expose them as not nice people. And it was a kind of a phase. It was the way they sold biographies then. So I recommend John Higgs on Leary if you want to read a slightly more balanced thing. Plus, I love John Higgs. Anything written by John Higgs, I recommend.
My favorite biography on Leary is by R.U. Sirius, which he actually posted online for free at one point, and because he sort of looks at both sides. I mean, I think R.U. Sirius loved Leary, but he also wasn't blind to some of his flaws. I can remember it was in one of those post-mortem books that came out of collections of people on Leary, of the instance of Leary just being very upset about having failed as a parent, having failed as a child, and expressing that frustration. And that was such an extremely human anecdote. And you know, it makes you realize that with all his brilliance and all his research and all his, you know, one of his books was called Changing My Mind, among others. I mean, he really did a lot of work, but there were still some core issues there.
Sure.
That was the era too of psychology in the 50s, but he was a part of, was they were going strong on behavior modification, you know, and that's where MK Ultra came out of that. And I think where the internet has gone too, like how do you alter, how do you change behavior? And now how do you predict the behavior that's going to be changed? And that's where AI is going to enslave us all.
Well, I'm going to take the opportunity to jump in there, because we started talking about AI previously, and in particular, you know, in terms of the writers' strike, in terms of these large language models. And I actually know a little bit about this one. Citations Needed talked about the use of the writers' strike, and how it's not so much that you can get a robot to write a good script, but you can pay somebody a different amount of money to do editing versus to do writing. Even though what you would probably have to do if you were given an AI script to write is you would probably have to delete everything and just write the damn script. And I think AI is really interesting. It's already, people are noting like just the internet getting a little bit shittier in terms of just coming across content that is very clearly AI influenced, AI produced, little mistakes, and then you've got AI's training on what? On AI produced material, which is causing some problems. But at the end of the day, as a teacher, and I know that Bobby's got students and Eric's got students, AI can only copy, AI can only duplicate. You know, and models like GPT will limit certain things from being duplicated, but it really only can repeat what's come before. And just bringing it back into Prop's point, you know, this talking about, you know, limits on behavior and so on. Well, if you're only repeating things, that is itself a limit on behavior. You're only ever going to, you're not going to find what, again, Deleuze would call, you know, these lines of flight. You're not going to find these exit points. You're not going to find these innovations or these new points. AI isn't going to write something and be like, oh, hang on, what if I did this? What if I did that? It doesn't do that. It just does what's been done before. And you know, I think that's it's a useful tool, but definitely, you know, being the way that it firstly gets used, you know, in a kind of capitalist mode, you know, is can be very threatening. And I think also the way that it kind of limits us away from the new is also, you know, something that is makes it a little bit emperor's new clothes for me, and certainly as far as LLMs are concerned.
Yeah,
I think about Robert Anton Wilson's interest in H.P. Lovecraft, and somehow I imagine Cthulhu is trying to get through the AIs, and that it's encouraging them to learn chess. I think about the novelist Fritz Leiber, who was a friend of Lovecraft's and also saw chess as this obsessive human activity. And somehow, as these AIs become fascinated by chess, it will let Cthulhu through. I had an idea years ago what if Tim Leary had set up an obesity clinic at Millbrook? And I remember talking with I'm forgetting his name, the guy who started the R.A. Wilson fans group on Facebook, Brian Shields. And I remember at Bob's celebration 2007, talking with him about that. And I had at least this notion that they shut down the obesity clinic, and Miskatonic University sort of picked up their work. And I'm sort of, they contacted me, but I'm sort of scared to go.
So I wonder if part of marijuana's become pretty legal in a lot of different places. And I remember when I was younger, this occurred to me because I remember we smoked marijuana in public at Robert Anton Wilson's memorial, and I remember like being all like nervous and looking over my shoulder and stuff. And now that's like, not really a thing. Like I can just go to the store. And so that there was all this, like me and my friends, we would kind of imagine what the world would be like when, the marijuana consciousness was more prevalent. And we are kind of in the world where marijuana consciousness is more prevalent. And I wonder if this is the cause of some of this strangeness, is that because I was thinking, like, we had a like QAnon kind of family in town, and they were just potheads. That's where it was coming from. They were just right-wing potheads. And I was like, oh, I get you. I get that. So I wonder if that's driving things at all, or if that's not really, people aren't really doing it more. Seems like they're doing it more. And that would, like, think of it, of like the world entering the Fifth Circuit in a way, like that kind of transition from only material concerns into these more interior building mindsets. And wonder if that might have something to do with, I don't know, just feels like I created, all my comics are branded with the word weird, but the world outpaced me, and now the world is weirder than I am, and I almost feel embarrassed putting out these things, be like, oh, that's so weird. It's like, no, it's not. Like, I'm a high school teacher with 3 kids. Like, I'm not weird. The world is weird. If anyone's got anything, feel free.
I think it's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Here in California, November 2016 is when they legalized recreational marijuana. That's the same election when Donald Trump was elected.
Right.
And just a few weeks earlier, Bob Dylan had won the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Right, and like R. Crumb's on the front of, the New York Journal, and this thing where the counterculture is now the culture. I guess that's a thing that everyone's kind of pretty well digested, and I'm just kind of rehashing it, but it is a bit odd.
I think that 2011, there was like the Occupy Wall Street movement, and it replicated in different cities around the world, and I was involved in the one in San Diego, and I watched a lot of my friends from there kind of become the Trumpsters eventually. And I think that we were using the internet a lot then to communicate and to share information and to advertise certain events that were happening. And it was really beautiful in a lot of ways that it was kind of open to conversation and just kind of creating the space for people to talk about how government wasn't representing them. But watching the social media that friends of mine shared that I met through there, and watching how they kind of went down the avenues that they went towards toward the right, I think that like it professionals were ready to use social media to drive people's like openness to suggestibility in directions that were contrary to what a normal stoner would where a normal stoner would arrive. So I think they kind of expertly manage that in a lot of ways, where like people like Joe Rogan, you know, like he's someone that kind of moves people to the right, people who are open to ideas that like we're all open to and that were normally associated with the left, you know, are there were like lots of bridges like him. There were like lots of people like him that kind of nudged people in a direction that you wouldn't expect them to go to after becoming stoners. And I
Yeah.
think
Well, you're
You've
talking
got
about
this.
you're
There's some,
definitely talking about set and setting now, aren't you? You know, forget dosage. It's to do with mindset and the relative association, you know, the
like
environment in which
yeah.
you're experiencing this stuff.
I've experienced definitely for sure the sort of right turn of online media sources of late as well. You know, a lot of these commentary and like shows, just these sort of really kind of right tropes. And then also then it gets confusing because that's where Bob went to with non-Euclidean politics, not to the right, but to this notion of we have to find common ground. And it can become a trap, man. Like it's you know, can lose perspective, you know, and the struggle still continues. You know, they just legalized weed in New York, you know, and you know, I'm at a place right now where they don't like the smell of weed, so can't really smoke it in the backyard, you know. So go for a little walk with my girlfriend. We go to the park right before this whole thing here, and there's a private pool next to some big rich private place, and there's a little hole in the fence, and we can hear the kids screaming and yelling, but we're in the public park, and the lifeguard shouts over the fence like, can you stop smoking that, please? There are kids here, you know. And it's like, wow, what are you talking about, bro? You know. And something too with how it's interesting how cigarette smoking, everyone used to smoke cigarettes everywhere. I grew up with asthma. My mom smoked cigarettes in her car right next to me, and I was a jerk for telling her to stop smoking a cigarette. You know what I mean? And now you got people, the kids don't want the smell of weed. What are you talking about, man? It's weed. This is medicine, you know. But like, so the struggle is still there. How do you normalize? Because people are now so nanified about smoke. No one wants any, don't smoke, don't blow the smoke near me. You know what I mean? It's like, man, but like this simultaneous interesting place we're reaching where everyone wants to be all careful, yet America is sending bombs to blow people apart, you know, left and right, you know. And just this crazy time we're living in of how do you seek balance within that. And I'm just going to keep smoking weed.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know that the marijuana these days is the same as the marijuana when it was illegal. And maybe people who get products from a dispensary more can speak to that. But I know that there used to be a huge industry where I live in Northern California of growers, and some of them were had very high standards of doing it really well. And as soon as it became legal, all these guys got brought out of business. Like their market is such that it costs them more to grow a pound of weed than they can sell it for. But still, the price hasn't gone down at the dispensaries. And there's also a lot of the vaping products and all this stuff. Like it's a lot different. And so I don't know that that it's the same thing. Like that's actually getting back to Deleuze. Like Deleuze is one of his issues is that everybody tends to see things the same. Like you say marijuana and you think it's the same marijuana all over, but he emphasizes looking at the difference of things. And so I just don't know. I've experienced that phenomena of people I know who are really psychedelic heads, but they're also way into QAnon and all that stuff. And so I don't know if it's becoming more of a, you know, people are getting programmed in a different way. And what Prop just said is just what I've also feel strongly about too is that back when I was growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, I mean, the anti-war sentiment was huge, very strong, and I believe it helped stop the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. And I was kind of shocked when the Gulf Wars started coming out, and everyone was like, yeah, let's go get this guy. It wasn't anti-war stuff anymore. And nowadays it's just like, I just wonder, I mean, why don't they try to have peace in Ukraine? I mean, why don't they just start talking about it instead? It's all this sort of war culture. And now we just hear they're sending these really horrible weapons over there. And so I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist and say, oh, well, the corporations are programming us in a particular way. But yeah, it's not the same.
I'm kind of with you there. I mean, I smoked dope for 46 years and I gave up about 10 years ago because in the UK, I can't get Nepalese temple balls anymore. I can't get Thai sticks. I can't get Afghani. I can't get Lebanese. I can't get the stuff that I grew up on. If befriended, and it was definitely a friend of mine. I realized that what was happening was that all this grass that I was buying in Wales was being grown in people's lofts and basements under UV lights. And I don't want to get into the karma and the wine tasting aspect of it, but there's something about factory farming. This stuff had never seen sunlight. It had never been loved. It had never been nurtured or cared for. It's just force-fed, factory farmed grass and very strong. And somehow I fell out of love with it. And I kept going. When somebody gave me a nice piece of hash, I'd go, I'm a dope smoker. But there was something about the grass that was being pushed round all the kids. And they would always smoke dope and drink alcohol at the same time, which never happened. In the 60s, we were dope smokers and you didn't really do alcohol because they didn't mix. They were different areas of consciousness, Nowadays, something's happened. Anyway, I don't know. I can't explain why I no longer find it attractive. Perhaps it's just me. Perhaps I just got older. But if you gave me a piece of Nepalese temple ball now, I'd be on it like a shot. But it's not available to me. Maybe Mick Jagger can still afford it, but it doesn't reach the streets. And there's something about the street grass now that feels force-fed, it doesn't do the same thing to my head, That's all I can say.
Sorry to quickly add on to what Ava was saying as well about the Occupy Wall Street movement and some of them transforming into the strange QAnon-ish sort of thing. There was a good podcast that came out within the last year called American PSYOP. And it followed the story of Wesley Clark Jr., who was the son of this neocon, General Wesley Clark, who worked for NATO and all this sort of stuff. And it's a super interesting podcast because it's an interview style, but this guy is basically telling his story from 2000, from Occupy until Standing Rock protests that he eventually got involved in. And it's interesting because there are some things that is said within it where it's like, this seems like a psyop. Like the whole story is him talking about how he thinks that he got psyoped, but here's the son of a huge NATO guy, neocon, trying to lay out this theory, which could be a psyop as well, but part of it was that there was the thing called this I Am movement, right? And they're involved in the Saint Germain Foundation, and they own the Gaia news network. Well, not news, the Gaia TV network and all this stuff. But these people or whatever some of them were involved in Occupy, and part of the whole thing was like a cult to get people and shift them over to their little I Am cults. And I just thought that was really tripped out. It was very cosmic triggery. This guy's story. He even spoke about how he got fixated with the number 40, some number, right? And it's like, man, if only this guy read Robert Anton Wilson. He got stuck reading the Bible and he thought he was some kind of prophet, But it was really deep though, in terms of what he was laying out of who are these groups and organizations behind the scenes. We're taught by Bob, laugh it off, right? You'll be fine. But there really are people vying for other people. They want to grab their minds and make them one of them, you know? And I really wonder about that. There was some people involved in the Occupy movement who then were big in the I Am movement, right? And of course, that's not all of Occupy. It was just a small faction. And then maybe with the internet, how these Facebook groups could have worked, how you just pump the, cultural evangelism, how you just pump it, you know? So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the like most toxic ideologies kind of clothe themselves in about like 70% of the stuff that's familiar and palatable to us, which is like questioning things. You know, like I watched a Charlie Manson thing. About 70% of what he was saying was like a folksy Alan Watts routine, but then you know, once he it was like, oh shucks, everything's everything, and but that's when you inject the venom. It's when like, so it's like doing like I watched the what is it, the cult people that killed themselves trying to ride the UFO thing. So I watched that documentary, and half the time the guy's doing a Timothy Leary routine, but then so it's like they were basically working with an early or like a rough approximation of reality tunnels, but then instead of just leaving it blank and for you to at your own discernment build your reality tunnel, then once he had deconstructed consensus reality, he reconstructed his reality tunnel for them. And like similar, like what Eva was saying about Joe Rogan, I feel like half the time it's like, you know, he's doing the routine that is like the same old thing, questioning this, questioning that. But then the other hand comes in and it's like, and don't believe that, it's all bullshit. Now believe this. And that's the thing that Rawl didn't do. Rawl never came in with the other hand and said, now believe this. But you have people kind of playing and building with these tools in a way that like knocking down the reality tunnel, but then using that as a wedge to get their shit in. And I think that's the stuff that's a little bit tricky to parse out, because like a lot of it is palatable when it's just like, you know, asking the big questions, and you know, like sort of like are you serious was saying how like something like Leary's question everything, like it can't be mass produced because it doesn't translate without discernment. So like if all you're doing is questioning authority all the time, then like you're not like you might as well throw time binding out the window, because all the things that we've built up from the past is just another thing to be questioned, which in some cases it's good, in some cases that's why you need discernment. So, but I think there is this thing that's weird, that's like, there's a version of stuff out there that's very similar to the stuff we like that is not the stuff we like. And I just think that's kind of interesting.
It's, if I could just make two little points. It makes me think about watching MSNBC, which I like a lot of stuff that they do. I am struck by, with the indictments of Mr. Trump, they've had a lot of anti-jury nullification stuff lately. Okay, and I think about how much Robert Anton Wilson loved jury nullification. I think in large part because he thought it could combat the drug war, but that people just come out and over again saying you have to judge by the law. That's what the jury does, as opposed to the long tradition of saying no, the jury is also there to judge the law, which you see in Magna Carta and a lot of American jurists. Secondly, this overwhelming sense, and we've even, I mean, I think we're all guilty of it sometimes, of seeing conspiracy theorists as a bad thing, saying no, people work together sometimes, they lie about it sometimes. This is how human beings work. But you know, it just the relentless idea that conspiracy theory is a bad thing, as opposed to saying you can think about conspiracies in an intelligent and questioning way, or you can do it in another way. It's just and it's sort of like what Bobby talked about how the paradigm shift from seeing the Bible as a literally true document, as opposed to, oh, perhaps the world is moving. And again, that literal metaphor, the world is moving, I think it's still and it's moving. That really fucked people up. Okay, this is part of why Bruno got burned at the stake, you know. And it's still in the same way. I think we've all had that experience. I think reading Robert Anton Wilson is like, the world's moving. I don't know if I want to do this. You know, maybe I don't want to turn where it says.
So I've started to have an odd experience, just kind of like changing how I view creating art. For me, this is for me specifically, but I had an odd experience where I was like, you know, I teach 500 students. I have 500 students, and I started to notice like, oh, I'm doing way more good here than I am at the drawing board. And it was a thing that I had never really felt before. Like, it was always like, I'm trying, like, it's my day job and I'm trying to escape it so I can like pursue my ideas and build these grand ideas that I had. And yeah, it was a change in perspective of just like this like small scale action is actually more beneficial than these like overarching like ideas that I've been, you know, building since I was little, that just and it's so dumb. I buy these like giant things of peanut butter and cheese crackers, and the kids, you know, they get free lunch, but they're embarrassed about it. So a lot of the kids walk around hungry all day. So I started feeding them cheese crackers, and just like watching the impact of that, I was like, oh shit, that has a more combined good in the world than all my comics put together ever. And that was like such a eye-opening thing to be like, oh right, that's the thing. That, I mean, not to say that I, you know, I still do my thing, but it was the first time where it was like the thing, my job was my job, which I'd never really had before. And the idea that just small scale direct intervention was an interesting path forward. But that's more particular to my experience.
That's very.
Oh.
I
I just got something on that just because, sorry, both my parents were at some point performers and became teachers. And I never thought I was following in my parents' paths at all. But I after performing through the 70s, I discovered that teaching juggling and clowning and stuff like that was like planting a seed. I mean, just to give you a silly example, in 1978, we had a juggling convention with 11 people. Now, every year it's doubled. Nowadays, even in Belgium, you'll find a juggling convention with 3,000 people there. And the one or two people who know what I was doing in 1978 go, you caused, you know, you're to blame for that. And it's completely silly because, of course, it manifests in much more complex network than that. But there's been much more reward for me in terms of my solo show in the 70s is ephemeral. It wasn't filmed, it's not recorded anywhere, but the seeds that I planted and then my students then planted, and you know, I'm a great grandfather now, so you can see generations happening of this stuff. And the circus that came from some of my students is still going 40 years after it started. And I got to say, just in terms of what you're saying about students, the little tiny things that you did that changed people's lives in the long run, because I'm old now, in the long run, they seem like a much more interesting part of what I did than what my ego thinks was. I just did these little starry bits and pieces. But in terms of the seeds planted, I think it's that thing about the person who plants a seed for a tree that they will never sit in the shade of is doing something for the future. You know, if you plant a seed for a tree and you know you're not going to live that long to see it full sized, but to realize that even in the last 20 or 30 years, I've seen stuff manifest now, which I contributed just a seed, a spark. I mean, I'm really not taking the credit for this. But if you happen to be at the right time in the right place and you put a seed in the ground and it takes, then it's amazing, what the spin-offs are. And amongst your students, for instance, amongst my students, 1 in 20 became an artist. Lots of them just did it for fun for a year or two. 1 or 2 did it for 5 years and then they moved on. And 1 or 2 I still meet who are still doing the stuff that they started in my workshops, And it's just extraordinary to realize that some of your tiniest moments that you didn't value at the time are a treasure to someone else.
And Bobby, I respectfully disagree with you. I don't think you can evaluate the impact your art. I think everybody, all 8 of us, we've got all these images of your art, whether it's the cover of a book or something on the internet, that stays with us. And there's a line in the middle cantos or the Chinese history cantos where Pound says, "One spark lights a lot of straw." And that can be true of teaching, but it can also be true of art. And you never know the repercussions.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate it. That's so nice. And that's the other side of it that I like, why I feel like less inclined to like try to escape my current position, which has always been my default mode, is that the teaching thing actually supports the art, in that I got 3 months and all I'm doing is making comics and goofing around. So it kind of, it helps to not have to worry about becoming successful, because that's a hard thing to throw on top of trying to create something that's good, is to try to create something that's going to be successful. And so getting to like take that out of the equation, and just make the thing that I want to make, is pretty nice. The switch, so weirdly, like the switch to viewing it as a hobby, I'm no less productive. I'm just less stressed out about it.
I definitely wanted to talk to that too, Bob, because that's something I'm very resonant with. I think when I got into teaching, I kind of had this mentality of like it was, inherently doing some good. If you're teaching, you're part of the solution. You're doing something that's inherently good. And I think I drifted away from that a little bit, kind of, I guess, that early career energy kind of, makes way for this later career cynicism where you sort of say, okay, well, schooling is absolutely an entrenched part of the same system that is, making everything worse, that is moving us towards climate crisis, that is moving us towards whatever else, and I think, okay, well, this is kind of still stuff that I can do the best I can do with, and in the background, do this writing work, do this other stuff. And I think that, kind of similarly to what you're saying, that those writing projects have brought me to ways of finding openings in my practice as an educator and finding ways to work in different ways. And one of the things, tying it back to a bunch of other threads, was this idea of, okay, well, the do your own research crowd. It was funny because I've sort of engaged with a lot of that, and you're allowed to say anything. You're allowed to say, oh, it's the Jews did it, or you're allowed to say, oh, the aliens did it. The only thing you're not allowed to say is whatever they're saying on CNN and ABC. Like that means you're sheeple. That, and kind of, for me, a big part of my praxis has been, okay, how do we take away this authoritarianism of schooling? How do we take away this sense of, I have the answer as the big smart person up the front, and you have to say my answer, otherwise you're dumb and silly. and kind of working ways into, so really, building into the classroom these processes that it's political, but in a different way. It's really trying to build into how do we make an actual real engagement with the world an actual authentic part of our schooling process. And it's just, I know I've ranted a bit here, Bobby, but I very much identify with what you're saying, and it's almost like I had to go on this little journey, I guess, into art, into literature, to find my way back to a more fresh approach to educating that maybe dealt with some of those elements of schooling that are exhausting and are quite cynic making, about the ways in which, schooling is an entrenched part of the way we do things, which, is not necessarily having the best results at the moment.
Yeah, I hated school. Hated it.
Me too.
I cheated my way through high school. I did nothing. The older kids would just give me their old notebooks and I'd erase their name and turn it in. The goal for me was to do as little as possible, and it worked. And everyone was in on it. Everyone knew that I wasn't going to do anything, and they were going to help me not do anything because it was funny that I was, I was in all the top classes and I got great grades. Read no books. A skill that I still have to this day is I can write an A+ paper on a book I've never read. And that's the attitude I came into teaching high school with, which is like, which has created a like us versus them relationship with my students that really kind of makes things a lot easier. Because I'm like, yeah, no, I agree. Like they'll come in and tell me that their teacher is giving them bullshit busy work, and I'm like, yeah, that sucks. And so like when we do stuff, I make sure, like, if someone asks me, like, when am I ever going to need this? I have an answer. Like, I know, like, so I try it, and it seems to be successful, at least in my little world. I'm lucky because I just teach a creative tech class. So I don't have to teach the kids algebra. I don't have to like, if I had to teach them algebra, I think I would be bad at it because that attitude doesn't work probably for those subjects. But I'm just teaching, like, literally they said, just keep them busy. And I was like, okay. And so I got to create my own curriculum and I get to do my own thing entirely. And so it really
but
is.
how much, I feel like they're probably going to use a lot more of what they learned in your class than they will from algebra.
Yeah,
yeah. I feel like I'm biased. So like, I don't trust my belief in that. And I try to like, not let my cynicism affect them too much. But yeah, I agree. That's the goal anyway, is to give them something that's like actually more useful.
Yeah.
I was thinking that like as a teacher too, that does seem satisfying enough to kind of make me not create as much. Like when I know I feel like I am planting enough seeds that way as to not need to create something as much. So it's hard to find a balance there. But like we often talk about like loving, like romanticizing the ideas of the future, like we see in Ra's works. And I was noticing the other day that like I've been in Chicago lately, and I'm used to living in California, and there being fires in the southern part of California where like there would be smoke and air quality issues. And then like it moved to the northern part of California where there'd be fires there. And then it moved to like Washington and Oregon and Canada. And this year it's happening on the East Coast in the US. Like there are wildfires, and it affected the air quality in Chicago, like, and people weren't used to it at all. And I was like, man, this really sucks that like it's 2023 and all the worst things we imagined in sci-fi, like the kind of that, the air wouldn't be breathable, that's happening more and more on a daily basis. And like the best thing we have is a freaking like Roomba to like we thought we'd have like robots cleaning our houses, and the most we have is like this robot vacuum cleaner type thing, like it's so it's advanced in ways that are kind of disappointing, and yet like the pollution and the damage that we've imagined that we've done has progressed right on track, you know, like as we imagined it to. So that was kind of disappointing. But at the same time, like I feel kind of freed by the hopelessness. Like it's kind of like, well, you know, there's a lot that I could do. There's a lot that I could contribute. But what's the point? I just will enjoy it all while it lasts. And I feel kind of like not too pressured in any way. And hopeful of the like fungus idea that whatever consciousness we have achieved within this human civilization might get stored in some spores and passed on to the next one, and that we might contribute something good that way at the very least.
There was an incredible optimism coming out of the 60s and the 70s that was reflected in Wilson's books and in Leary's books about how it was going to be a real incredible utopia-like future where people were going to get smart and figure out all the problems and stuff. And but there's also, I mean, Crowley predicted that we were going to go through another dark ages, and I'm kind of leaning towards that as what's going on in the wider world. And you know, with for me, it started around the time of 9/11 or whatever, and it seems there's just a lot of heavy shit going on right now with like the war in Russia just kind of going on unabated, and you got all this gun violence in the United States, etc. And so I see the role more as like passing on the wisdom, passing on the gnosis, passing on, like you said, the spores to the next generations, like just keeping all this technology alive, keeping, you know, the brain change ideas that Wilson and Leary had, just passing them on so that maybe someday the intelligence will break through to the people who are power possessors. I was convinced, I mean, this is just my belief, that if someone who had been trained in Prometheus Rising, someone who knew how to communicate with other people like that, could have averted the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Someone could have gone to Putin and like dealt with him on that level and like, you know, what do you need to do to stop this horrible thing? Again, you know, my paranoia says that there are other reasons for them letting it happen, because they just basically let it happen. They didn't even address his main contention of Ukraine not joining NATO. So anyway, that's sort of my optimism is more to do with passing on the light. Like there's a lot of great information out there, and but it's not in the mainstream enough to so far change things in a better direction.
Eric, you want to say a final word before you dip out?
It was Stuart Brand in the last Whole Earth catalog did a review of ABC of Reading by Ezra Pound, and he said, in high school I learned to hate literature. In college I learned to hate it in French. Ezra Pound, where were you when I needed you?
That's great. Yeah, I think so my idea of optimism has changed lately, and now it's more like, you know, I'm you know, the cartoon where it's like the dog sitting at the table and the flames are all around him and he's saying this is fine. Like I think I used to think of optimism like that like it was like a denial of like trouble. But it's more like I think optimism is like running around with a fire extinguisher in that scenario. That's optimism is pushing back against the bad things, not a denial that the bad things exist and are formidable. So like, yeah, like the problems it remind the the fires in Canada, the smoke coming down, it became a very literal metaphor, because I'd never experienced that before. And it put me in mind again of what Are You Serious said, is that the future is going to be defined by events, not ideas. And I mean, that was an inescapable event. School got canceled, and like you couldn't go anywhere. Like it was just everywhere. And it was just like an interesting thing to have a problem that you really couldn't do anything about. It was fascinating. It was like just the environment was smoke. And like there was nowhere, like, you know, it wasn't like, oh, it's flooding here, let's go there. It was just everywhere was smoke. So I think the idea of like building within that scenario, I think that's optimism, or if nothing else, maybe it's a more precise word is hope. Maybe they're like similar, but not exactly the same thing. So maybe I have hope and not optimism, or, you know, however you want to define it. But I definitely like, I'm like, every night when I go to bed, I'm so still excited. I'm like a little, I don't want to go to bed yet because I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that, I want to do this. I'm remodeling the laundry room. It's like, I want to, oh, I can do this. Oh, we should do that. And so like, I think like, I think that is the best I can do. And I think that's like, because things don't have to be perfect. Things don't have to, not everything has to work out in its best possible way. But I think so long as I'm pushing forward through the smoke, I feel like I'm living up to the things I learned when I was young.
Well, there's reasons to be optimistic too. Sorry, someone speaking. You know, in December 2022, Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, the physicist basically achieved cold fusion for the first time ever. And so here is the possibility of a quote unquote utopia right now at our fingertips. And the irony, the Hollywood movie-esque aspect of all this, we're about to introduce nuclear weapons into the conversation again, right? What's going to happen is World War III at our doorsteps, right before we can really make a breakthrough to achieve usable cold fusion. You know, to me, that's huge. I think that December 2022 is going to go down in the history books. That's one of the biggest events of our lives. You know, like, give it a few decades, will they achieve it in time? We won't know. We got to tune in after these commercials, you know, like that seems to be how we work down to the wire, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's easy to miss those little things that pop up too, because you're kind of thinking of the more immediate problems. But you're right. I mean, and you could probably collect like, you know, dozens and dozens of little data points that are pointing towards, just as, you know, just as we have these overarching things that point to negative outcomes, there's all these things that are pointing to the positive ones. And yeah, I have to assume that if you had the time and the gumption, you'd find the balance. You'd find that like it's just as likely to work out as not work out.
I've been doing a new job. Like I remember this time last year, I was talking about how kind of disappointed I was in rich people, like that they're, you know, going to space, but like everybody was like going on these joyrides to space, but not really feeding, you know, the starving or whatever. But like I've been working with a lot of rich people's kids lately, like trying to help them get into universities. And they really inspire a lot of hope in me. A lot of them, like I'm seeing a lot of, there's like, of course, all over the world, people who are rich and never taught that they have to do anything with their wealth or privilege. But I'm seeing a lot of kids who feel responsible for their privilege and wealth and feeling like they have to do something to help the future more so than the people who have less than them. And that makes me really hopeful. Like that's changed for me in the past year. And so I'm optimistic about them. And I wanted to share.
That's fantastic. Yeah, overall, like I would say the kids like that I am exposed to are the number one source of hope, because I would like all of them are more clever than I was at their age. Like it's just like my kids are so much smarter than me. I'm like friggin' Homer Simpson to these kids. Like it's just like, no, actually, Dad. Like, and I'm just like, oh, okay. Like it's amazing, like just how far beyond my kids and my students feel like they are, and they're thinking in these like bright new ways. And yeah, I definitely am very impressed with like the younger generation, and I think they're gonna like I think they're gonna be able to put things together much easier than we have. Just like I feel like they're on the case already in a way that like I was not. I was not on the case you know, when I was 12 years old. I was dealing with my own shit. So yeah, the kids definitely give me a lot of hope.
Yeah, I think that's where the greatest hope lies. I've felt that for a long time, for sure, in the next generations. And that's why, you know, we keep passing it on, and at some point the mass will, you know, break through, hopefully, and affect it on a larger scale.
Yeah, that actually that reminds me of like Crowley's thing where I think it was in Yoga for Yahoos, where he's like, it's a miracle that you might have time to even try this, like to study yoga. Like that's not a guarantee for most people's lives to have enough leisure to try to study meditation. Like if you are doing this, you should consider yourself lucky that you have any opportunity whatsoever to study these things. And I think that's remains true. And like what like but you know, he put the signal out, it was carried forward, I received it, I've had a ton of leisure time to pursue it, and it just builds forward. Like you say, just keep it going, just keep it going.
And I'll just point out too, this gets back to what you were saying before about Bobby, about not sure what your art is affecting. At the time that Crowley died, he sort of thought he was a complete failure because there was only a few people in the world who were interested in his ideas. He had no, you know, I mean, I think he hoped that they would catch on, but at that time, I mean, he had like a dozen people at his funeral or something like that, and there was like a group of people in Southern California who were a little bit crazy anyway. But at the time that he passed, he had no idea that people this far in the future would even be talking about him.
Wow. I can't imagine him having doubt about that just from the way he writes. But I guess in some ways he's playing a character when he writes, when he's the freighter guy. That's a different thing from the guy sitting there at the desk performing the character, or like channeling the gnosis, to phrase it more congratulatorily. But yeah, that's fascinating that he had any doubt whatsoever.
Yeah.
You guys want to start wrapping up? Yeah, everybody want to like put in a final word? Let us know where we can see you and what you're up to.
Yeah, I'll jump in with just to keep part of that conversation going as well. You know, is that, you know, it's very tempting, I think, to kind of take hope in this kind of effective sense of like this hopey, futury vibe. You know, and you sort of think about, you know, like your pop music or your TV shows or whatever that kind of have this kind of hopeful tone to them without really having anything of substance. And I think, you know, I'm a lot more attracted to hope in this very weaponized form of, you know, like an aggressive assertion that things can be different to the way that they are now, and to try to break into that through the wall of what's possible. But I might just cede my time because Eva's got to go, so I might let.
Oh yeah, Eva, do you want to throw a final word in?
Or if you... I was just gonna say, keep talking. I'm enjoying it. I'm just running, cool. Getting stuff ready as I run out the door, but I'm listening to it all. So
all right, that sounds great.
Yes. What's that?
Sorry, and yeah, so that's what I'd say about, you know, hope, and in, you know, again, in my classroom, I'm really trying to give students links to real, genuine learning experiences that involve a confrontation with the unknown, with new possibilities, you know, and just experimenting in ways to make the curriculum really interact with their lives in meaningful ways that provide the opportunity for something new to happen. And to tie into the serious sort of connection there, part of that is, being willing to explore things from different vantage points, and to be willing to explore things from, maybe even a confrontational vantage point, that, this isn't the way we have to do things. This isn't the way things have to be. This isn't even necessarily the assumptions of reality maybe aren't the ones that we have to hold on to. And as far as plugging goes, I'll put it in the chat. I'm Chasing Eris on Twitter, and I've got a Discord there as well. And I'll post a link after this on the Twitter in case anybody wants to check that out.
Fantastic. Oh, and just to throw something out real quick about, something I've noticed is that it's very hard to get students to do things, but it's a lot easier if, instead of trying to get them to do something, you just provide a resource for them and see what happens. And I think that might be true across other contexts other than just school. So like, instead of like giving them a specific assignment, I bought like 150 Rubik's Cubes, and just, here we go, we're doing Rubik's Cubes. And they all like, it was like an obsession throughout the school, Rubik's Cube. If I had told them that that they had to figure out Rubik's Cubes, they never would have done it. But I was just like, oh, there's a bunch of Rubik's Cubes over there if you want them. And just like, you wouldn't believe, like on their free time figuring this thing out. So yeah, so that just sparked that.
You have to get them to want them to do it.
Right, yeah, exactly.
They want to do it themselves. They can't be told to do it.
Yeah, no one likes being told what to do. I think that's true everywhere. And so if you can provide resources, that's like a new little mantra I have in my head: provide resources, provide resources. And how to do that is tricky, but I think that's something I'm thinking a lot about. So the next thing I'm working on after I finish this current thing is a public domain graphic novel where all the characters are just take and do what you want. It's gonna be, I like, especially now, because like with AI generated art's so, it's like a pop signal. It's disposable. So like, just here, take the art, take the characters, everything's like up for grabs, sort of like the old Principia Discordia style. Just create resources and put them out into the world. Who knows what, it may or may not do anything. Anybody else want to hop in on the farewells?
Just on that one, I seem to remember we had a group writing session at one point where at least 7 of us, I think, had our avatars, and we each wrote bits. And because you created cartoons for each image of the person. But I remember we did a group writing project, and it was, it goes right back to the Dadaists, this thing of writing a piece and folding it over, and writing a piece and folding it over. I quite like anything that gives people a creative opportunity where they're not responsible for the whole thing.
Yeah,
where they can just contribute a piece, or a kick, or a stimulus, or just a twist, And I do like group projects. I mean, I'm an individualist myself, but when teaching, I realized that evoking stuff in groups is a really creative process.
And I did the edit on that went into the magazine, and it was like magic. It really was, like the way everything connected together, even though it was written, no one knew really what anyone else was writing, but it's still like connected together. That's the thing. That's the value of art that like could never be taken away, is the discovery in the process, the discoveries, then the connections that happen. Like, you paint yourself into a corner and you're like, how the fuck am I going to get out of this? But then it turns out that the whole thing was necessary entirely, and your solution to get you out of that corner connects with everything holistically. And it's like, I was not conscious of this design. I just painted myself into a corner, but the only solution was somehow a correct answer for that situation that connected in dozens of different ways. the experience of creating art is the real like jewel of the whole thing, the actual process.
Yeah, it was like a writer's room. You know, I felt that I was just chipping ideas in. And if they didn't go anywhere, somebody else would take it and run off in a different direction. But it didn't matter because we were all inspiring each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Fun stuff.
Absolutely. Oh, and I've been playing around with the Houdini Crowley thing again. I've been yeah, I kind of have an idea for how to do it. So I've been kind of drawing those characters again. I think I might have something for that sooner rather than later.
Well, I look back at it and I realize how linear and rather mundane I am when you'd ask me to write that kind of thing. Because when I look at your stuff, I go, wow, I mean, it's like fireworks, you know. I thought mine was a little bit plodding, but it was the first time I ever tried to do anything like that, and you invited me to try. That was such fun.
And that's what I wanted it to be, because like I wanted it to be a plausible meeting between the two. When you read it, it feels like, no, that could have happened. So yeah, that was exactly what I wanted.
That was all I came up with. Yeah.
I'll sign off.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's okay.
I was just going to say, getting back to where we started with the serious contact stuff, it reminded me that the scientific theory of parallel universes is still valid, and there are real scientists that they're in a definite minority, but who still research this and believe it's possible. So this idea of extraterrestrials could be, you know, from different universes, and even magic can work that way by tapping into, like, one of the theories is that you can tap into yourself in another universe, that, like, if you wanted to play the saxophone, like maybe there's a universe where you had decided to learn the saxophone a long time ago, and if you can contact yourself in that universe, then this saxophone playing information can come through you. So that's one thing that there is a scientific basis even for, or, you know, possible one. And the other thing is that I just posted this blog that on Rabelais' Pantagruel and Gargantua that kind of blew my mind. I was just reading the book and it opened me up to a lot of things. And one of the things is that, and this ties in with Deleuze also, Deleuze agrees with this in The Logic of Sense, is the importance of humor. Humor as a way of, as a medicine, as getting us through things, as being like the sugar that helps the medicine go down. You know, Rabelais kind of started social satire, and you know, Rabelais influenced Monty Python and Frank Zappa, for instance, and all these people who were able to get across. And at the time Rabelais wrote this is in the 16th century, at the time of the Reformation, and you know, he had to be very careful about what he said, because if the church establishment didn't like it, he could be locked up or killed. But he used humor as a way to sort of get around all these things, to be able to communicate things, but have it go down nicely. And my blog is, the link to that is on Tom Jackson's blog, on his blog roll there. So
and I'll put it at the bottom of this video. So like I'll take a list of everybody's everything. And so like if someone's watching this, just scroll down and everybody's links are there.
Yeah.
Just a quickie here, because you mentioned JFK earlier on, and everyone classically goes, where were you when JFK died? Obviously, some people weren't even born, but I don't remember where I was, but I do remember being astonished that Aldous Huxley died the same day, and was completely ignored by the news because of the JFK thing. So because you've been talking about Bob's experience 50 years ago, I was thinking, well, okay, spring 73, where was I? I'd spent about 2.5 years on the road. I spent 6 months in Paris, and then 18 months in California and America, and 6 months in Mexico. But at that particular time, when Bob was experiencing that thing, was when I had just realized what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I mean, I'd been on the road for years, and I'd slowly worked out that I was a street performer, that I wasn't going to work for a boss, that I was a juggler and a magician and an acrobat, and I was going to do something quite odd where there was no precedent for it. Nowadays, you can get a degree in circus studies, you know, but at the time, And I realized looking back, I didn't know what Bob was going through, but looking back, I go, yeah, at that particular time in my life was when everything resolved. I just knew what I was going to do for the next 20 years. And I wonder if you weren't alive or old enough to know what was happening in 73, then what other things synchronously happened at that time? Just historically, what else was going on at that point in time? Any ideas? I don't know.
Yeah, well, there must have been like some wild like energy in the zeitgeist going on, because most like prominent psychedelic writers had some sort of like landmark contact experience. Like,
well, Leary's in jail, isn't he? Is Leary in jail at that point?
Yeah, so Leary's in solitary confinement, having contact with the starseed transmission thing.
Yeah.
And then Lily's getting the cosmic coincidence control stuff. McKenna's getting the like what is it, the Philosopher's Stone machine elf thing going on. It's just like it wasn't odd, I think, to report a contact experience at that time, which kind of takes us back to the crop circles, which is to say, like, even if these stories are man-made, the fact that they were made anyway in whatever context still constitutes something weird enough to write home about.
Yeah. It was a strange time.
I guess so.
I was going to say, Philip K. Dick also had his contact experience.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The Valis thing. Yeah. There was, and then I wrote a whole thing about it, connecting all of those guys together with the Applewhite people. I can't remember their name all of a sudden, but anyway, that's it. Yeah. And apparently, like, it was not an uncommon thing for there to be UFO cults running around. Like, that was it was just a thing that was in the air, I guess.
Well, that touches on it, yeah. Like, what produces what, right? Like, so the culture, Jeffrey Mishloff called it the psychic 70s, you know. And then what also starts then is Operation Stargate.
How interesting.
So yeah, the U.S. military getting all interested in paranormal events, and there supposedly the interest starts because one of them, Major Stubblefield or something, reads the book about the Soviet Union doing psychic experiments. So how the sort of zeitgeist is international, you know, and what led up to this the 70s like that. And then Gary Lackman has an interesting theory, or, you know, points something out that's quite interesting, that what happened in Germany before the rise of the Third Reich was this sort of escape into the irrational, right? Yeah. And so that's where it gets very dangerous in some ways to go down these paths and roads. This is where Bob is exceptional, that it, you know, these sorts of, you're thinking about paranormal events and conspiracy theories, you know, you can easily lose track with critical thinking and skepticism and try to ground stuff in your everyday reality, you know, and how do you hold that balance? And that's something that Bob was so great at doing, and hopefully trying to teach that to people who read him, you know, later on. And it seems like there's some philosophers now who, like, you know, I haven't read Deleuze yet, but the things I've heard, the way he breaks things down sounds somewhat similar to Bob, and it's pretty cool, you know, like, of how do you basically stay grounded in one perspective without getting overloaded by another perspective, and still, as the Zen saying goes, like, chop wood, carry water, you know. But culturally, I mean, it is interesting. And then again, my whole thing is like imagination, man. You know, Bob, he's a writer. His brain works as a writer. He creates stories. So he woke up on July 23rd with the phrase "Sirius is very important." You know, the coincidence is that the fact that, I guess, July 23rd, Sirius is the brightest that is in the night sky or something like that. But, you know, has anyone ever thought about this? Like, Bob is a writer, he uses words, and literally the definition of Sirius is very important.
Yeah.
So you could have started this whole thing just based on that shit, man.
I've just
It's a
realized something else.
Joycean pun, of course.
I've just realized something else for 73. Of course, that's when the UK joined Europe after many years of trying to join. Now we've left stupidly with Brexit and everything. But actually, you know, in my life, in my mid-20s, we became Europeans. I could go to all those European countries without visas, without money, I could just cross all the borders to 27 other countries. Well, it wasn't 27 then, but a dozen other countries. I could suddenly have freedom of movement. Freedom of movement, when I became a street performer in 73, was really crucial to me. And it was really exciting times, you know, because this optimism of the 60s thing, well, it was the early 70s as well. There was a real optimistic feeling that this is the way to go, you know, we're going in the right direction. It's sad.
That's wild. That the world opened up to you. That, like, in a very literal way. That's very cool. That's like,
literally.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting too. Oh, sorry, God.
I was going to say quickly, on Hilarious Press podcast, they had Ramsey Dukes was on there, and he used a term which I love, which is the gift of belief, giving the gift of belief. I think it's you know, it's very easy to get caught up, you know, the experience of, I guess, receiving a message, whether that's through a dream or through contact or whatever. You know, I think the affectivity of that can be very positive and exciting and vibrant, and I think it can be easy to just assume that, oh, well, then by default this is a good thing, and by default this is going to go somewhere, as opposed to, you know, I think somebody, Christian Greer, you know, talked to me and said, you know, he sort of uses Principia Discordia like Mao's little red book. You know, you just sort of pull out what you can strategically and make use of it in this kind of very strategic way. And I think, you know, the same goes for, you know, your machine elves and your alien contacts and whatever, you know, is, I think there's a stage at which you have to be selective about where you give your gift of belief, what you choose to believe and why you choose to believe it, and to do so in a way that I guess is strategic towards, you know, building the future that you want. And that's what Bob was great for, you know, was having this reflexivity in belief to choose to believe something in order to get from A to B. And then as soon as you need to get from B to C, you know, to maybe rearrange those beliefs, you know, as accords to the circumstance.
But then you have to believe that no matter what, you're doing good, you're in the right, you know, because you could believe 2 years from now, QAnon, you could believe in Trump. You know what I mean? Like, so that's always a hard thing, isn't it? Figuring that out, like being skeptical of your own projections and stuff too, you know?
Yeah, I feel like this is something that Raw was, I mean, because I guess it's not really that different from how it was like back then, like all these like weird, like splinter groups with odd beliefs. And so like, as someone who is fond of odd beliefs, it's like, oh, I want to play around with all these like different flavors of ice cream. But then it's like, but I think the discernment, the thing that like you can say, oh, I don't want to try that ice cream flavor, is the scapegoats. I think that's the thing that like identifies one of these belief systems as something that's not a fun toy, is when they have a scapegoat. And that's when you can go, oh yeah, no, good luck with all that. I'll see you elsewhere. Because that's the thing that's like no fun about it, is when you know, you go into a thing that's like silly, and then it turns out not to be silly. It turns out to have a particular type of person that it wants to direct you towards as an enemy. And I think that's where it goes the worst. I think most of the other effects that these things have aren't as bad as that one. I think that's the one where it's harder to shake it off because you're contributing to something that's like actively harming people.
So regarding which beliefs to believe in and all that stuff, it reminds me of a subject that Michael Johnson goes into in the essay in the forthcoming Lion of Light book that's coming out. And he talks about, he does a deep dive into intuition. What is intuition? And to me, it's your intuition is something that can be strengthened and developed, and so that it can be kind of a rudder for, is Trump really a great guy or not? Well, what, intuitively, what do you think, type of thing.
I think this is just restating a form of general semantics, but I haven't read all of Science and Sanity. But a lot of the graphics suggest this might be a part of that. So if I'm stealing it from them, there's the credit. But I think that we react as the organism as a whole to something, and then invent our rationale after the fact. And I noticed this, oddly enough, this is a very embarrassing way to realize something. Years ago, I was watching that Superman versus Batman movie. And I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. This is no fun. Like, this movie makes no sense. I think I'm too old for this shit. Like, fucking hated it. Dumb movie. Bad. Boo. And so I go home and I'm like kind of reading the comments, and there's someone there who's like espousing all the things that I thought, like, this movie doesn't make sense. This part doesn't make sense. Why would Superman do this? Why would Superman do that? Dumb nerd shit, but there it is. But there was someone who loved the movie, absolutely loved it, and had an answer for everything. No, it makes sense because of this. No, that he said that because of this. So like when I said the movie didn't make sense, no, what it was is I had a reaction of the organism as a whole that said, I do not enjoy watching this, and then invented the reasons after the fact. And so I was, you know what I mean? So like all the things I was saying about it were just rationalizations to explain why I felt what I felt when I was watching it. And I think so I was thinking in terms of like the Supreme Court stuff that's been coming down, and that our legal system has become so like twisty, turny, like Byzantine, like it just goes on forever, and you have precedents that go everywhere, and that basically you just react how you want to react, what you think, and then invent the legal basis for it after the fact. And that all we pretend that we're arguing on some rational basis, but it's just gut instinct versus gut instinct, and who's going to do the paperwork good enough to, justify their gut instinct. And like someone asked Marshall McLuhan about anarchy, like we were like going into anarchy. He's like, oh no, we achieved anarchy long ago. And I think that's like sort of what I'm thinking is that like there's no legal basis. There's just legal justification for what you think anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called colonization, man.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
This is ours now.
Right. Yeah. It says so here, and here. And yeah. Well, that's about all I got. Anybody got anything they want to throw in the pot?
I'm good.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for coming out. It's wait, was it? No, it's 19 years, right? Because it was the summer of 2004. So next year is going to be the 20th anniversary of the Maybelogues thing. Wow, which is kind of wild.
I got one thing to add. I want to
please, yeah.
Oh yeah, bro. And there's all
that thing turned out so great. That thing should have set the world on fire. What was everyone thinking?
In 100 years, this is going to be auctioned at Sotheby's.
For sure.
I still got a couple of copies.
Yeah, I got a stack somewhere. I can't wait to read that book. That is so exciting. Your journalistic skills that I've seen are like just outstanding, and like I think you got something really special just from looking on the outside, and I can't wait.
Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate that, man.
It's going to be a game changer in the raw world, I think.
That's fantastic.
Thanks,
that's
guys.
Fantastic, man.
It means a lot. It means a lot.
Do you know what you're doing next, or is it still just eyes on the prize on that thing?
I want to put together like a pretty cool sort of like book tour thing, reading sort of experience, try to blend some music with it, with the intellectual side of book readings, but like in terms of books, a couple ideas. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I might just put out tertiary sort of around the Bob book, because yeah, doing the whole life of this fella, he opened, as you guys know, so many doors. So there's a lot of stuff I didn't really even get to put in the book, you know. But a couple different things, man. You know, I think if it's either going towards some study of some kind of espionage sort of thing, like as influenced by Bob breaking down Propaganda Due, or some sort of just like, again, dipping back into the waters of what were these, you know, what was Leary and Lilly and Groff and McKenna and Bob talking about, because I think really so much of that stuff is going on right now, and so much still needs to be unpacked, you know, like we need a lot of books on this stuff.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, guys, thank you so much. Looking forward to you know, putting together all the Maybe Day stuff, and this is a part of it. And I thank you so much for your contribution, and I'll see you guys around. We stuck together this long. Look forward to what comes next. All right, guys, have a good one.
Thanks so much, Bobby.
Thank you.
Take care, man.
All right, see it.
Peace.